Hello, my name is Cynthia Maguire, and I am from Texas Woman's University in Denton, Texas. My co-author on this presentation, Dr. Dunlap, is not with me today, but she sends her regards and would love to hear from any of you who would like to correspond with us after you watch this. Texas Woman's University is the largest public university in the nation that is a primarily for women institution. We have a little over 15,000 students on 3 campuses and a fairly unusual student population in that it's about 2/3 undergraduate and less than 50% white. We're ranked in the top 15 schools in the nation for a diverse student body. One of the unique things about our institution is that every student has to take 2 laboratory science courses, a minimum of 6 credit hours, in order to receive a degree. We have largely a female population, no surprise there, but we've admitted men for a couple of decades now, and it's increasing very slowly, about 1% a year increase in male students. Our average student is also a little older than the typical, and so it's a very unique institution. Here you kind of see the ethnic makeup of our student population. We are the host for the SENCER Center for Innovation Southwest, and the co-chairs of the center are Dr. Sheardy, my department chair, and myself. And we focus on 3 things within our center: environmental sustainability, science teacher preparation, and undergraduate research. The talk today on dual posters focuses on the undergraduate research focal point. The idea for the dual posters was originally conceived by Dr. Garen Smith at the University of Montana and by David Burns, the PI on the SENCER grant. Their idea was basically that students working in technical disciplines have difficulty communicating their knowledge outside disciplinary experts. And it was, what can we do to help those students? And so they conceived of the idea of a student doing a set of posters, one that is their normal technical research poster presented to the experts in the field, and the other is reworded for use with a general audience and something that would communicate the importance of their work and the ideas, the value of it, to well-educated people of any background, not just to experts. We could see a lot of reasons to like the idea, but we could also see that in its infancy there were a lot of rough edges in the presentations that those students did. And so our hope was that we could kind of help smooth that out and make it easier to do this idea. The overall concept of dual posters is that a student learns to communicate their technical expertise through working with their mentor in their research group and so forth. And they create a technical poster that is proficient within their discipline. And other experts in the discipline can easily understand what they're saying. But the rest of us, those who may not be an expert in the discipline, might not understand much of what they say simply because we're not familiar with the jargon. And so the concept of a dual poster is that the same student would produce their technical poster, the one they would normally take to a meeting, but then they would also produce a second version, a public version of their poster. And in the public version, they communicate in well-educated but common language that all of us can appreciate. So in the first phase of working on this idea, the 2 students that I was working with, Leanne Shepard and Nicole Wallace, and I went to students working in the research labs in the various sciences at Texas Woman's University. We approached the faculty first and said, would it be okay if your students worked on this project with us? And those faculty who approved it, we talked to their students and said, are you interested? And we found Much to our surprise, only 2 students said yes. And one happened to be in biology and one happened to be in chemistry, and they were both graduate students. So during that year then of 2010 and 11, they completed their first dual poster pairs. So one of the problems we encountered was that the faculty had some serious reservations, and some of the faculty said things like, well, it would be okay if they have time, but that's a big tip-off that mentor is not willing to invest any time in this idea. So we passed those people up and went on to other students. The process basically involves reworking all the parts of the technical poster and creating new wording that everybody can understand. So you start with the title and take a technical title and rework it into a general purpose title. And consider things like, what is the public impact of your work? Well, what's the purpose behind it? Things like that. And then share it with someone who doesn't know what you do and see what that title communicates to them. Do they now understand your work or the idea behind it, or do you need to keep working on it? And you repeat this process for each part of the poster. So here's an example of the biology graduate student's work, her technical poster title and her public title. And we can see, all of us understand something about sunflowers and honeybees, so we have a common frame of reference for this topic. But mutualistic relationships and microscope work we might not be as familiar with. And so understanding the relationship between these two things is a much more understandable concept. The chemistry student was working on DNA sequencing. Here you see the abstract from her technical poster on the left and her public poster on the right. And just the fact that there are so many words makes her work a little more intimidating, and we don't have as much of a common frame of reference to understand DNA structures either. Honeybees and sunflowers were much more comfortable with that topic in general. So Brenna had a lot of work to do in order to get this into its public format, and even she was amazed at how much time it took. This is not simple, and it's not dumbing down the science. I really want to emphasize that. There's nothing about this that dumbs it down at all. So when you get it rewritten, of course, your mentor needs to say they like it. And questions you should ask yourself are, is it presentation worthy? Is it something that you would be proud to take to a meeting and present? And is the science still good? Have you represented accurately what you've tried to accomplish? And does it represent your institution well? So among the things that we've learned are that dual posters have some significant benefits for both the student and the institution, and for the audience. It is easier for a general audience to understand the public version, and the more complex your material is, the bigger that improvement in understanding also seems to be. Students get from it that they actually learn to focus on why their work matters and the applications for their work, as opposed to just a theoretical exercise because somebody said this is what you have to do to get your degree. We also learned that if students don't truly understand the concepts behind their work and why they're doing what they're doing, this will come out in the process of trying to explain it in common language. So it's important to be aware that if you have any kinks in the student's knowledge, those are going to be visible in this process. And isn't that wonderful? Because they haven't graduated yet, and you have a chance to fix it while you still have them. And that's the idea behind this. It's really one of the most valuable parts of the project. And for the institution, once you have a set of dual posters, you can create a poster show, putting those two side by side. People who visit that display will then be able to see These people are technically proficient. They know their science. They're doing good science. At least it looks impressive. But I can look at this one and now I understand why they're doing what they're doing and what it's good for. And so for, let's say, a high school student or an undergrad student who's not at this graduate research level yet, it could be a really good recruitment tool to say, oh, I want to learn how to do that. And clearly, I could learn that if I came here. So it's a good idea. And of course, parents would love it because they can see that their kid is going to learn something good too. So we learned a few things the hard way in this part of our project. And one was that there's more going on than meets the eye. And I'll explain more about that in just a moment. And another was that I am not an expert in this field. And honestly, I haven't met any one person who might be an expert in this whole idea. But we can easily find other people who do know more and who can help. And that's an important aspect of what we needed to do. So going to the literature and looking into a little bit of what's actually going on behind the scenes. The idea of learning and how do we learn and what promotes good learning. Randy Bass has done quite a bit of work on this, and he uses the phrase invisible learning. It's the what goes on as we process information when we're not even thinking about it. You know, we're asleep while we're doing this sometimes, so literally asleep at night. And so there are steps in the process. And we focus on creating an end product, but our brain has to do it stepwise in little bits and pieces. So what kinds of things help us to accomplish that? And as an educator, how can I recognize and support that stepwise process that will help my students move from a novice to an expert within my discipline? So expertise then is really the critical thing, and it's the difference between cookbooking and actually understanding deeply what you're doing and why, and being able to solve problems and create new knowledge based on your actions. So once you have it, then you have knowledge that is organized with facts that are associated with big ideas, and you're able to use those ideas then to interpret things in the world around you. And this particular quote, I think, speaks for itself. Novices have to have meaningful ideas presented in a way that they can recognize in order to process information. So the National Research Council has done some work on learning as well, and they present 5 key principles for expert knowledge. And the first is that experts have patterns to their knowledge. They understand the relationships between separate facts, but novices do not. Experts have a body of knowledge, and it reflects a deep understanding of a subject, but novices do not. Experts cannot reduce their knowledge to just individual facts because they see it as a whole concept. But novices need to be able to look at little bits of it at a time, and they don't see the whole concept necessarily. Experts have no difficulty retrieving information, even minute details, but novices have a great deal of difficulty with that. And although an expert may know their discipline thoroughly, that doesn't mean they can communicate what they know. And experts have to really be careful that they don't fail to bring their students up to their level. If you can't meet a student where they are, then they have much more difficulty scaffolding up to the expert level. So it's important to really mentor this process. Well, since 2011, I've done quite a bit of work trying to learn more about the scholarship of teaching and learning. and to develop this into a genuine SOTL project. And that's kind of where we are now as we're embarking on phase 2 in the dual poster study. We're looking for additional institutions to support this work and to broaden the database that we have to work with. We're also looking for additional disciplines. So if you don't happen to be a chemist or a biologist, that's great. We'd still love to have you join us in doing this. So starting a couple of years ago, we're looking at phase 2, and what we want to do is collect qualitative and quantitative data from students and from their research mentors while they're in the process of creating their technical and public poster pairs. We can see that this would easily go to future topics that would be a broader knowledge base in all fields, not just science fields, but we'd like to know much more about the long-term impacts that doing this actually might have on a student, how it might change their thinking in future research projects, their ability to focus and organize information should increase, but does it? We'd like to measure that at some point. Find out a little more about how we actually learn the process of translating jargon into general vocabulary terms. Find out more about the impact on an audience. We've done a little work with that too, but nothing that's ready to publish, and it would be interesting to know more about how that actually might happen. And of course, as a faculty, one of the most interesting things to me would be, what is the impact it has on the faculty mentor? Does it increase our ability to teach well and to actually provide that mentoring process to bring our students up to an expert level within our fields? And SOTL is the ideal research method to use for these kinds of questions. I would encourage anyone who wants to address this to do some literature search in the SOTL community. So our current goal is to code qualitative data, and we're asking the students who do dual pairs to keep a journal. Then we'll go through those journals and use coding, and this is kind of where Dr. Dunlap comes in. She is my partner at the TWU campus because she's done more of this kind of qualitative research, and she's much more familiar with coding than I am. And we'll also at some point set up oral interviews with both the students and their mentors, depending on which phase of the research we're looking at. This is an image of the poster presentation that we have currently, and it kind of explains it in a all-on-one slide format, so that's why I've put it in here. And it talks a little bit about why you'd want to get involved in the future questions for research and so forth. It also shows you a little bit of data that you can see here. You may want to expand on that part to see more detail, but it gives you kind of what we learned from looking at the two pairs on the DNA and the honeybees. And so if you're interested in collaborating on this, Karen and I would love to hear from you. Here are both of our email addresses, and we'd be delighted to share what we know and even more delighted to learn what you want to teach us too. Here are the references to give you specifics on some of the literature. I mention right here that Leanne Shepard and Nicole Wallace wrote a handbook on how to do the public version poster, and it's a step-by-step guide. It's unpublished, but I'm happy to share it with you in a PDF file and let you use it. We have their permission to do that. So within the education group, we have a different set of references. So this talks a little more about how we construct knowledge and how we learn pedagogical content. So I want to thank David Burns and Garen Smith in particular, but everybody, and Matt Fisher has been my SOTL mentor. Danielle does a wonderful job of supporting us in the National Center. And the TWU SENCER team has also been very supportive of our work, and so thank you to them as well.